Have you ever wondered why, no matter how kind you are, people still treat you like you don't matter? You give, you listen, you show up, yet it feels like the more you offer, the less they see you. It's confusing, isn't it? You were taught that kindness is a strength. You believe that being there for others would earn their appreciation, maybe even their respect. But instead, you're left drained, overlooked, and asking yourself, what did I do wrong? That pain, the quiet ache of being kind in a world that doesn't seem to care, is real, and you're not alone in it. There's something deeply disorienting about being ignored after giving your best. You try to keep the peace, avoid conflict, go out of your way to make people comfortable, but somehow, you end up with the shortest end of the stick. People cancel on you, they talk over you, they forget your efforts. And each time it happens, a piece of you starts to wonder if maybe you just aren't enough. But let me tell you something that may change the way you see this forever. It's not that your kindness is the problem. It's that most people don't understand how to value it when it comes without limits. This is the truth no one tells you. Kindness, when not backed by strength, can get mistaken for weakness. When you're always giving and never asking, always agreeable and never honest about your needs, others begin to assume that your time, your energy, your heart aren't worth much. It's not that they're cruel. It's that human nature is wired to value what has boundaries, what stands its ground, what demands respect. If you constantly place yourself last, people will believe that's where you belong. But here's the good news. You can change this. You can still be the kind, warm, generous person you are without losing yourself in the process. This video is going to break it down for you. You're going to learn why your kindness hasn't earned the respect it deserves, and more importantly, how to change that without becoming cold, rude, or someone you're not. You're going to understand the psychology behind respect, the silent messages you've been sending without realizing, and how small shifts in the way you carry yourself can completely transform how people respond to you. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover could change more than your relationships. It could change how you see yourself. You'll stop feeling invisible. You'll stop apologizing for existing. You'll begin to feel power where there used to be guilt, confidence where there used to be confusion. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be, kind, but unshakable, giving, but grounded, compassionate, but never again taken for granted. If you've ever felt like your kindness is costing you respect, then you're exactly where you need to be. Let's fix this, together. People don't respect what they don't understand, and most people don't understand quiet strength. They see loud opinions, sharp boundaries, and firm stances as confidence. But when kindness shows up gently, softly, without demands, it often gets misread. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because people are conditioned to equate power with presence, and presence with boldness. If you've been kind your whole life, it's possible you've also been invisible in ways you never intended. And that invisibility is not your identity. It's a symptom of how the world reads signals. Respect is built through contrast. The contrast between yes and no, between availability and selectiveness, between giving and holding back. If you never show that contrast, you become flat in their eyes, predictable, easy, and over time, unfortunately, easy becomes dismissible. That's what hurts the most. Not the act itself, but the realization that your purest intentions, your desire to support, love, uplift, have somehow been turned against you, leaving you depleted and wondering if maybe, just maybe, being kind was a mistake. But it wasn't. The mistake wasn't kindness. The mistake was believing that kindness alone would teach people how to treat you. The human brain doesn't automatically assign value to goodness. It assigns value to things that challenge it, things that aren't freely available all the time, things that carry a sense of earned worth. If someone gives you something endlessly and without boundaries, your mind stops seeing it as precious. That's not because people are ungrateful. It's because this is how the brain protects itself from overload. And when you're the one always giving, always understanding, always adjusting, others stop seeing your sacrifice. They just see your behavior. And that behavior teaches them one message. This person will always bend. It's time to send a different message. Not with anger, not with force, but with clarity. The kind of clarity that says, I choose to be kind, not because I lack power, but because I own it. When you start showing people that your kindness comes from choice, not fear, not guilt, not the need to be liked, everything begins to shift. They start noticing your energy. They start listening when you speak. They begin respecting your time, your space, your truth. Because now, it's no longer a default, it's a decision. And decisions carry weight. You don't have to become someone else to earn respect. You just have to realign how you show up. You just have to stop hiding behind kindness and start standing inside it. Let it be your strength, not your mask. Let it be your shield, not your silence. Because when kindness is paired with confidence, it becomes undeniable. It becomes powerful. and you become unforgettable. This is where the change begins, not in them, but in how you see your value. Once that shifts, the world follows, every time. When you constantly give without limit, the message you send without saying a word is that you don't need anything in return, that your time, your energy, your attention are always available, no matter what. People stop asking if you're okay. They stop wondering how you feel. They stop seeing your kindness as effort and begin seeing it as your role. And the truth is, roles get taken for granted, especially the silent ones. The more you try to be everything for everyone, the more invisible you become to them. Not because they're cruel, but because you've trained them, without meaning to, that you're always there, no matter what. This is how the cycle begins. You give because it feels right. You help because it feels good. You support because your heart tells you to. But over time, something shifts. You start noticing that people don't offer the same back. They don't think to ask how you're doing. They don't make space for your needs. They love what you do for them, but they stop seeing you, and that's when the ache starts. That quiet resentment that builds in your chest, even though you smile. That weight in your stomach that tells you something is off, even as you nod and agree and keep giving. The human brain is wired to recognize patterns. If you give endlessly, you become background noise. Familiar. Predictable. And people don't value what's always there unless they're reminded it's a choice. You are not a service. You are not a convenience. You are a person with limits, with needs, with value. But you have to show that, not by becoming less kind, but by becoming more intentional. Every yes must mean something. Every act of generosity must reflect a choice, not an expectation. That's how you start teaching the world how to treat you, by showing them that your kindness is powerful, not passive. Respect doesn't come from what you do for people. It comes from how you treat yourself while doing it. If you give and give, but never speak up, never push back, never say that's enough, then your kindness loses its edge. It becomes noise. But when you give with discernment, when you set the tone, when you honor your time as much as theirs, you shift the energy completely. People stop assuming. They start asking. They start appreciating. This isn't about withholding love, it's about preserving your self-worth. Because if your kindness is costing you your peace, your rest, your identity, it's not kindness anymore. It's self-abandonment disguised as generosity. And the moment you begin choosing yourself, not instead of others, but alongside them, you start commanding a different kind of respect. Not one you beg for, one that's felt. Quietly, deeply, automatically. And it all begins the moment you stop proving your worth through sacrifice and start standing in it without apology. That's the shift that changes everything. You've been taught to avoid conflict, to be agreeable, to smooth things over. Somewhere along the way, your mind learned that safety comes from keeping the peace, that it's better to stay silent than to risk tension, that love is earned through being pleasant, helpful, and easy to be around. But that wiring, while it may have protected you once, is now keeping you small. It's holding you in a version of yourself that serves others but silently hurts you. And the worst part? You've started believing that this is just who you are, that your voice doesn't matter, that your needs come second, that being kind means being quiet. But deep down, you know there's more to you. There's a part of you that wants to speak up, that wants to be heard, not just tolerated, that wants to express, not just agree. That part of you isn't selfish. It's not dramatic. It's real. And it's tired of being buried beneath the pressure to be liked. Your brain may be wired to avoid discomfort, but your soul is wired for truth. And the truth is, respect doesn't grow in silence. It grows in honesty, in clarity, in the courage to show who you are, even if it shakes the ground a little. People respect those who respect themselves, not in words, but in energy. When you hide your needs, people assume you don't have any. When you hide your feelings, people assume nothing hurts you. When you go along with everything, people assume you stand for nothing. That's not because they're bad. It's because they're responding to the version of you you've been showing. And it's time to update that version. Not to become cold, not to fight, but to stop erasing yourself in the name of being nice. True kindness includes you. It includes your time, your values, your boundaries. Every time you hold back your voice to keep others comfortable, you send a message that your comfort doesn't matter. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you teach the world that your needs are flexible, optional, forgettable. But you are not optional. You are not here to be convenient. You are here to be whole. And wholeness includes truth, even when it's awkward, even when it's messy, even when it's not what they want to hear. There is nothing weak about kindness, but there is something deeply damaging about kindness that's fueled by fear. The fear of rejection, the fear of judgment, the fear of not being enough, unless you're constantly giving. Let that fear go, not all at once, just enough to start choosing yourself again. Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. Set boundaries, even if they push people back. Because the people who truly see you, the ones who matter, won't leave when you stop people-pleasing. They'll finally meet the real you. And that version? That version deserves every ounce of respect the world has to offer. You've been living on emotional autopilot, responding to the needs of others before you've even acknowledged your own. You anticipate their moods, their problems, their discomfort, and you adjust yourself to make everything easier for them. And the world calls that empathy. But when your empathy leads to self-erasure, it stops being a gift and starts becoming a prison. You shouldn't have to lose yourself to be loved. You shouldn't have to shrink just to keep the peace. You were not born to be background support in everyone else's story. You were born to take up space in your own. The problem is, when you've spent your life being the nice one, the reliable one, the one who's always okay, it becomes terrifying to do anything else. You fear the judgment, the discomfort, the shift in how people see you. You worry that the moment you stop saying yes, they'll walk away. That the moment you stop overgiving, they'll stop needing you, and maybe even stop caring. But what you don't realize is that every time you betray your own needs to secure connection, you teach yourself that love must be earned through sacrifice. And that belief is not only false, it's toxic. The most powerful transformation begins the moment you realize that your worth is not measured by how much you endure. You don't need to prove anything by being endlessly available. You don't need to fix every problem, smooth every rough edge, carry every emotional weight just to feel valuable. True value comes when you learn to hold your own emotions with as much care as you hold others. When you finally give yourself permission to say, I matter too. That single thought changes everything. It shifts the way you walk into rooms, the way you speak, the way you stop apologizing for existing. And here's the truth that hurts before it heals. Not everyone will like this version of you. Some people will resist your boundaries. Some will guilt trip you, question you, push back. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. That means you're changing the dynamic. That means the old version of you, the one who accepted less, tolerated more, smiled through silence, is fading. And that's a good thing. Growth always disrupts comfort, but it also creates freedom. The kind of freedom that lets you be kind without being used, loving without being depleted, present without being invisible. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not selfish for wanting to be seen. You have spent enough time proving your heart. Now it's time to protect it. Let your kindness be a choice, not a currency. Let your love be deep but not destructive. Let your empathy remain strong but rooted in self-respect. Because the moment you start treating yourself the way you treat others, the world will learn to do the same. Respect isn't something you chase, it's something you embody. And when you finally embody it, it echoes in every room you walk into, even in silence. You don't need to become hard to be respected. You don't need to build walls, stop caring, or pretend you don't feel. That's not strength. That's armor built from pain. True strength is choosing to stay soft in a world that has tried to harden you, but with boundaries. It's knowing your heart is valuable and refusing to give it away carelessly. It's being kind, but no longer being used. Loving, but no longer being drained. Listening, but no longer being silenced. The shift isn't in your nature, it's in your standards. Every time you allow someone to overstep your limits without consequence, you're silently teaching them that your needs are negotiable, that your comfort is secondary, that your time, your peace, your energy are open for taking. But you were not put on this earth to be depleted. You were not meant to carry the emotional weight of others while bearing your own. That's not compassion. That's self-neglect disguised as selflessness. And the world will not hand you the respect you deserve until you stop handing them the version of you that won't demand it. Your energy teaches people how to treat you. If you walk like your voice doesn't matter, they'll stop listening. If you speak like your presence is small, they'll overlook you. If you move through life seeking approval, they'll sense the hunger and offer crumbs. But when you begin to honor yourself, something powerful happens. You stop waiting for others to validate you. You stop shrinking in conversations. You stop second-guessing your value. You start walking into rooms like you belong there. You start speaking like your truth carries weight. You start showing up like your existence is not up for debate. This is what quiet power looks like. It's not loud. It doesn't need to argue or explain. It simply is. And it radiates. People feel it before they understand it. They start respecting your time. They listen more closely. They pause before assuming. Because now, your energy doesn't beg. It commands. Not through force, but through presence. And presence is born from self-respect. You have given enough of yourself away for free. It's time to reclaim your space. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Not by becoming someone else, but by returning to who you were before the world told you to tone it down. That version of you, the one that knew they mattered without having to prove it, that version still exists. Underneath the years of overextending, of pleasing, of hiding. It's not gone, it's just waiting. Waiting for you to stop apologizing. Waiting for you to remember that you can be soft and still take up space. You can be kind and still set boundaries. You can be loving and still say no. The moment you start living from that truth, the world around you shifts. Because the most unshakable kind of respect begins not with what you do for others, but with what you finally choose to do for yourself. You were never meant to stay silent just to keep the peace. Peace that costs your voice is not peace, it's control. And the more you give into that silence, the more you train yourself to believe that your truth is dangerous. But your truth is not a threat. It's a compass. It tells you what feels right and what doesn't. It tells you when you're being honored and when you're being drained. It tells you who you really are when no one's watching. Ignoring that voice to avoid discomfort may win you temporary approval, but it will cost you something far more permanent, your self-respect. People don't respect what they don't understand, and they can't understand what you refuse to express. When you always agree, always nod, always swallow your discomfort, you become easy to manage, but impossible to truly know. And the more unknown you are, the easier it is for others to assign you a role that serves them. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but out of habit. You become the listener, the fixer, the peacemaker. Never the person with boundaries. Never the one who says no. Never the one who pushes back. And soon you start forgetting what you even think, because you've spent so long making sure everyone else feels okay. But you are not here to disappear. You are not here to be the container for other people's chaos while starving yourself of peace. You are not here to be liked at the expense of being real. You were born with a voice, and it was meant to be used, not to yell, not to dominate, but to claim your space in the world without apology. You are allowed to disappoint others in order to be true to yourself. You are allowed to speak even when your hands shake. You are allowed to say no even when they expect yes. Because that's what self-respect looks like in motion. Not perfect, not polished, just honest. You don't need to justify your boundaries to people who benefit from your lack of them. You don't need to explain your worth to those who only valued your silence. The people who truly see you will honor the strength it takes to show up fully. They won't punish your voice, they'll respect it. They won't push against your limits, they'll work within them. And those who don't, let them go. Their presence was never a measure of your value, only a reflection of what you tolerated. Let this be the moment you stop measuring your kindness by how much you bend. Let this be the moment you stop confusing being liked with being respected. Stand tall in your truth, not for them but for you. Because when you start showing the world that you are no longer available for one-sided relationships, for silent suffering, for being the emotional safety net for everyone but yourself, that's when everything changes. That's when you stop surviving your kindness and start thriving through it. Fully seen, fully heard, fully respected. The version of you that kept the peace at all costs was never weak. It was just tired. Tired of conflict, tired of judgment, tired of never being enough unless you were pleasing everyone else. You learned to adapt, to smile, to say yes when everything inside of you whispered no. You learned to put others first so often that you forgot how to put yourself anywhere at all. And for a while, it worked. People liked you, they leaned on you, they called you dependable, selfless, kind. But deep down you began to feel invisible. Not because no one saw you, but because no one really saw the real you. They saw the version of you that never pushed back. The one who didn't ask for much. The one who was easier to handle when silent. But your silence has become too loud to ignore. Your people-pleasing has become too painful to continue. Because with every quiet sacrifice, a piece of you slipped away. And now you're left with a question you can't avoid. Who am I, if I'm no longer what everyone else needs me to be? That question may scare you, but it also frees you. Because the answer is not lost, it's waiting. Under the exhaustion, under the pressure, under the years of self-abandonment. The real you is not gone. It's just been waiting for permission. Permission to speak without guilt. Permission to take up space without shrinking. Permission to be soft without being stepped on. You don't need to change your heart. You need to protect it. You don't need to become someone else. You need to stop hiding the one you are. Respect doesn't grow in places where you disappear. It grows in moments where you show up fully, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's unfamiliar, even when it feels like too much. Because the truth is, you were never too much. You were simply too real for those who only valued your compliance. Start saying yes to yourself with the same enthusiasm you've given to others. Start honoring your own boundaries with the same commitment you've shown to keeping others comfortable. Start believing that your feelings matter, not because they're loud, but because they're yours. The world doesn't reward you for disappearing. It doesn't pause to thank you for overextending, overgiving, over-apologizing. It just keeps taking. Until you stop, until you draw the line, until you say, "This is who I am, and I will not erase myself to be accepted." There is power in your kindness, but only when it includes you. When it's no longer about being liked, but about being true. When it's no longer about keeping people close at the cost of your peace. Let your kindness be rooted in strength, not fear. Let it be your choice, not your obligation. Because the moment you choose yourself without guilt, you give others the example and the permission to do the same. And that's how respect begins. With one bold, unapologetic return to who you were always meant to be. The moment you begin choosing yourself, the world reacts. Some people will step back, not because you've changed into someone worse, but because they were only comfortable with the version of you that didn't choose at all. The version that agreed, that adjusted, that tolerated everything in silence. When you start honoring your limits, the imbalance becomes visible. It exposes the places where love was conditional, where attention depended on your ability to meet their expectations, not your own needs. And that truth can be painful. But it's also the beginning of freedom. You were never meant to carry relationships that rest on your silence. You were never meant to live a life where love required your exhaustion. There is nothing noble about being constantly available to everyone but yourself. There is no reward for running on empty just to keep others full. If your kindness has become your prison, then it's time to reclaim it, not abandon it, not suppress it, but shift it, refine it. Let it rise from a place of power instead of fear. Because when your kindness is powered by self-worth, it becomes unshakable. It no longer seeks permission. It no longer apologizes for existing. It knows its value, even when others don't. Respect begins where self-neglect ends. Every time you say yes while feeling no, you chip away at your own foundation, and eventually, even the strongest heart begins to fracture. You feel it in the quiet moments, that emptiness, that longing, that ache to be understood without having to explain, to be accepted without having to perform. But no one can give you what you're not willing to claim for yourself. You cannot receive deep respect from the world while giving yourself only fragments. You teach people how to treat you by how you treat yourself. Your words might ask for kindness, but your actions must show that you believe you deserve it. This is the shift. You stop performing and start standing. You stop editing yourself to avoid discomfort. You stop confusing harmony with invisibility. You begin to understand that saying no isn't cruel, it's clear. That walking away isn't cold, it's conscious. That speaking your truth isn't arrogant, it's alignment. The fear you feel when asserting yourself isn't weakness. It's the residue of years spent adapting, adjusting, suppressing. And every time you move through that fear instead of folding to it, you rebuild your inner authority. The quiet, grounded, powerful sense that you're no longer begging for respect. You're becoming it. You don't need to fight to be seen. You only need to stop hiding. The strength you've shown in surviving for others must now be used to start living for yourself. Because your peace is not a luxury. Your voice is not a threat. Your truth is not negotiable. The world may not clap when you finally choose yourself, but it will shift. Not instantly, not perfectly, but undeniably. Because real respect doesn't come from how much you give away. It comes from how fully you stand in who you are without apology. You are not difficult for having needs. You are not selfish for honoring them. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that being low maintenance made you more lovable. That needing less made you more worthy. That staying quiet made you easier to keep around. But the truth is, love built on the suppression of your needs is not love. It's dependency, it's convenience, and it breeds resentment, not only from others, but from within yourself. Because no matter how much you try to simplify yourself for the comfort of others, your soul will always crave more than quiet acceptance. It will crave full expression. It will crave truth. When you suppress what you feel just to be accepted, you aren't being accepted. You're being filtered, and over time that filter turns into a mask, and the mask becomes your identity. You forget how to speak your mind. You forget how to say no without guilt. You forget how to take up space without shrinking. That's not growth, that's erasure. And no one is worth losing yourself for, not a partner, not a friend, not a family member. If the price of closeness is your silence, then what you're holding on to is not connection. It's control. Real connection requires real presence. It requires that you show up as you are, not as who you think they want. And when you do that, when you stop shapeshifting and start standing, something changes in you. You begin to reclaim your dignity, not from others, but from yourself. You start living with integrity, not in the moral sense, but in the sense of being whole. No more fragments, no more versions, just one you, real, raw, honest, grounded. The more you align with your truth, the more magnetic you become. Not to everyone, but to the right ones. The ones who don't just tolerate your boundaries but respect them. The ones who don't just admire your kindness but reflect it. The ones who see your strength, not just your service. These are the people who deserve access to you. And you don't find them by being agreeable. You find them by being authentic. Respect is not earned through sacrifice. It is earned through self-possession, through the unwavering belief that you do not have to be less for anyone, not in volume, not in energy, not in standards. Because when you walk into a room grounded in who you are, people feel it. When you speak from your truth without flinching, people listen. And when you no longer seek validation from others to feel whole, you become unstoppable. This is not about becoming hard or distant. This is about becoming rooted. You still love, you still care, you still give. But now you do it from fullness, not from emptiness, from choice, not from fear. You stop needing to be everything to everyone and start being everything to yourself. That is where true respect begins. Not by changing who you are, but by finally honoring who you've always been. You were not put on this earth to be a mirror for other people's comfort. You are not here to constantly adjust your tone, your truth, or your energy, just to fit the fragile expectations of those who never learned how to respect strength wrapped in softness. Your kindness is not a flaw to fix or a weakness to harden. But it must become intentional. Because when your kindness is offered without boundaries, it becomes a silent invitation for misuse. Not because you are wrong for giving, but because others are not always right in how they take. When people become used to your silence, your voice will feel like a threat. When they are used to you bending, your standing tall will feel like rebellion. But you must remember this, their reaction is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to live in alignment with your truth, not their comfort. If being kind to others means betraying yourself, then that is not kindness, it is avoidance. And avoidance will never bring peace. It only delays the inevitable fracture that comes when the pressure of pleasing others crushes your sense of self. You were not created to live a life of quiet regret. You were not designed to be a background character in your own story, and yet, that's exactly where people-pleasing leads. It convinces you that being liked is more important than being real, that staying agreeable is better than being alone. But let this truth settle deep into your bones. Being alone in your truth is far more powerful than being surrounded while suppressed. The respect you crave does not come from their applause. It comes from your ability to face yourself without flinching. Every time you choose your boundaries over their approval, you reclaim a piece of your identity. Every time you say no without justifying it, you plant your feet deeper into your own life. Every time you walk away from manipulation disguised as love, you return to yourself. And that return is the most sacred journey you will ever take. It's the journey of no longer needing to prove your worth, of no longer shrinking to be digestible, of no longer confusing your tolerance for strength. True strength is found in clarity, in discernment, in the quiet conviction that you do not owe anyone a diluted version of who you are. You were not born to be invisible, you were born to embody. Fully, deeply, unapologetically. And yes, that will shake things. It will unsettle those who only knew you through the lens of compliance. But that disruption is not destruction. It is a clearing, a cleansing, a bold, necessary shift toward a life built not on performance, but on purpose. Let your presence be felt, not just your silence. Let your energy speak, not just your words. You do not need permission to honor yourself. You only need courage. And that courage begins the moment you decide that your kindness will no longer come at the cost of your identity. You've spent so long making others comfortable that discomfort now feels like a mistake. But it isn't. It's a sign, a signal from deep within you that something is finally shifting, that the pieces you use to mold yourself around others no longer fit. And that is not failure. That is awakening. The resistance you feel is not a reason to stop, it's a reason to go deeper. Because beneath the fear of being misunderstood is the desire to be fully seen. And you can't be seen when you're always trying to blend in. You can't be respected when you keep asking for permission to exist. Every time you dim your light to protect someone else's comfort, you reinforce the belief that your truth is too much. But it isn't too much. It's just unfamiliar to those who've benefited from your silence. The moment you stop trying to be agreeable and start trying to be real, people will show you who they truly are. Some will withdraw, some will resist, but others will rise. Because your authenticity challenges people to meet you at your level. It calls forward those who are ready for depth, not just convenience. You don't lose relationships when you choose yourself. You lose illusions, and what you gain is worth everything you let go. This is the inner revolution. The moment when kindness stops being a performance and starts being a decision rooted not in fear but in self-trust. Because you no longer need to be the person who absorbs everyone's burdens while burying your own. You no longer need to over-explain your boundaries just to keep the peace. You no longer need to apologize for having standards. Your presence is not something to be managed. It is something to be honored. Respect doesn't come when you overextend yourself. It comes when you become unshakable in who you are. When your yes means yes. When your no stands on solid ground. When your energy no longer chases approval, but stands firmly in clarity. This is the kind of strength that can't be faked, the kind that makes people pause when you speak, the kind that commands attention without asking for it, the kind that says, I will no longer participate in my own diminishment. You do not owe anyone a version of yourself that exists only to keep them comfortable. That is not love, that is not loyalty, that is not respect. True kindness begins when you include yourself in the circle of care, when you stop making exceptions for everyone else while abandoning your own needs, when you treat your voice like it matters, because it does. You are not here to play small, you are here to take up space, to speak truth, to walk fully in your worth, and that starts with this decision: no more self-betrayal in the name of being kind. Let your kindness be strong, let it be bold, let it be whole, let it be yours. You don't have to fight to be respected when you stop begging to be understood. Respect begins the moment you understand yourself clearly and completely, without guilt, without shame, without delusion. It begins when you stop looking outward for confirmation and start anchoring inward in conviction. When you stop trying to explain your heart to people who only ever saw you as a role to fulfill, a need to meet, or a tool to use. You are not a function in someone else's life. You are a force in your own. And until you own that, people will continue to define you by what they can get from you, not by who you truly are. You've been taught that if you give more, tolerate more, say yes more, they'll see your value. But the truth is, overgiving doesn't increase respect, it erodes it. When you constantly show that your own needs come last, people stop asking where your limits are. They assume you have none. And eventually, they stop seeing your kindness as a choice and start seeing it as a weakness. But your kindness is not the problem. The problem is how long you've tolerated being unseen in order to protect the illusion of peace. There is no peace in being invisible. There is no freedom in constantly editing yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. And there is no real love in a connection that only thrives when you abandon your truth. You don't need to be louder to be respected. You need to be firmer, clearer, more rooted in the unshakable belief that you are enough as you are. Not after they approve, not once they validate, right now, as you stand, as you speak, as you choose to no longer participate in dynamics that drain your soul. Every time you enforce a boundary, you are teaching the world how to treat you. Every time you walk away from disrespect without explaining yourself, you reclaim your time, your energy, your dignity. Every time you say yes to your needs without guilt, you rise into your wholeness. This is not selfishness, this is self-honoring. And people who truly value you will never ask you to abandon yourself to keep them close. You have nothing to prove. You have nothing to earn. Respect is not something you chase, it's something you embody. It begins the moment you stop trading your kindness for crumbs of approval. It deepens every time you choose alignment over attachment. And it solidifies when you stop asking permission to exist fully in your truth. This is where your power lives. Not in being liked, but in being whole. Not in being everything for everyone, but in being exactly what you need for yourself. Because once you know who you are, and you stand in that without wavering, you become untouchable, not hardened, not cold, but untouchably whole. And from that place you no longer seek respect. You radiate it. People sense when you're unsure of your worth. It shows in how you lower your voice, soften your truths, and hesitate to take up space. It shows in the way you over-explain your boundaries and shrink your needs down to bite-sized pieces, hoping no one notices you're asking for something. But here's the truth. They do notice. And the world responds not to what you say you deserve, but to what you settle for. The way you carry yourself teaches others how to value you. And if you treat yourself like an afterthought, don't be surprised when others do too. Kindness, without the backbone of self-respect, becomes permission for mistreatment. Not because you're weak, but because you're giving your energy to people who only understand power, not compassion. And when you interact with someone who values dominance more than connection, your empathy becomes ammunition. Your softness becomes a target. Not because kindness is wrong, but because kindness, when not paired with discernment, becomes vulnerability without protection. The lesson isn't to stop being kind. It's to stop being kind to people who use your kindness as leverage. When you stop seeking validation from people who don't know how to value depth, you begin to build a new kind of strength. One that doesn't need to perform, doesn't need to bend, doesn't need to convince anyone of your worth. You begin to walk differently. Not faster, not louder, but more grounded, more whole, more untouchable. Because your validation no longer comes from applause, it comes from alignment. You're no longer looking outward for signs that you matter. You already know. And from that place, you stop tolerating situations that dishonor you, no matter how familiar or convenient they once were. There's no breakthrough without discomfort, no growth without confrontation, no transformation without letting go of the parts of yourself that were built only to please others. You're not here to be manageable. You're here to be real. And being real means sometimes being misunderstood, sometimes being disliked, sometimes being seen as difficult by those who benefit from your silence. But that's a price worth paying. Because every time you choose authenticity over approval, you rise. Every time you say, "This is who I am," even if you walk away, you heal. The most powerful shift happens when you stop asking how to make others respect you, and you start asking how to respect yourself, consistently and unapologetically. That's where the energy changes. That's where the dynamic flips. That's where the world begins to reflect back the value you finally decided to see in yourself. Because when you stop playing small, you stop attracting those who need you to stay small. And suddenly, the only people left around you are those who recognize your worth because they found their own. That's the space where real connection begins. That's the life that starts when you stop begging and start becoming. Not for them, for you. Always for you. Respect begins where self-neglect ends. If you've spent your life putting others first, hoping they'd one day return the favor, it's time to face the hard truth. They won't. Not because they're incapable, but because you've trained them not to. You taught them that your needs are optional, your time is flexible, and your presence is guaranteed no matter how little they give back. You showed up for them at the expense of yourself, and in doing so, you sent the message that you'd rather be used than be alone. But that's not love. That's fear wearing the mask of compassion, and it's time to remove that mask for good. There is a cost to always being available. There is a price to constantly rescuing others. Every time you say yes when your soul screams no, a part of you dies quietly inside. And the longer you ignore that voice, the harder it is to hear, until one day, you don't recognize who you are without the role you've played for everyone else. That's what happens when you build a life around pleasing people who only notice you when you're useful. You become a shadow of your true self, dimming your light so others don't feel uncomfortable in your glow. But you were never meant to live in the background of your own life. You were born to take up space without apology, to speak your truth without softening the edges, to choose yourself without guilt. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. It's what happens when you finally realize that pouring from an empty cup doesn't make you generous, it makes you exhausted. And exhausted people don't get respected, they get overlooked. So if you're tired of being the one who always gives but never receives, ask yourself why you keep showing up for people who wouldn't cross the street for you. The answer isn't to become bitter, it's to become boundaried, to hold your energy like it's sacred, because it is. To stop chasing after people who only notice your absence when they need something. Because real respect isn't earned by how much you tolerate, it's commanded by how deeply you value yourself. And that starts with changing the pattern. It starts by not answering every call, not agreeing to every request, not explaining your no. It starts by being so rooted in your worth that walking away becomes easier than bending over backwards. You're not too much, you're not too emotional. You're not asking for too much just because you want reciprocity. You're asking the wrong people. And the moment you stop asking altogether and start becoming the source of your own validation, you shift. Your energy changes. You attract differently. You live differently. And those who once overlooked you begin to feel the emptiness of your absence. That's not revenge. That's clarity. And with clarity comes power. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that no longer begs. The kind that walks in peace and no longer needs permission to be free. You can't become who you're meant to be while clinging to roles that shrink you. And nothing shrinks a person faster than always being the one who bends. When your default response is to accommodate, you slowly lose the ability to recognize your own boundaries. You convince yourself it's noble to sacrifice, admirable to be the peacemaker, virtuous to stay quiet when something feels wrong. But there is nothing noble about abandoning yourself. There is nothing admirable about being everything for everyone except yourself. And there is nothing virtuous about pretending you're okay just so others stay comfortable. You're not here to be a placeholder in other people's lives. You're not here to keep the peace while your spirit screams. You're here to embody your truth, even when it shakes the room. That requires courage, because people will resist it. The moment you stop being predictable, stop being agreeable, stop being easy to control, you will face pushback. Not because you're wrong, but because they've benefited from your silence for too long. When you finally begin to honor yourself, it exposes how little they've honored you, and not everyone is ready to face that truth. But you are, because the cost of staying small has finally become too high. You've outgrown the patterns that once kept you safe. You're starting to realize that being liked is not the same as being respected, and being needed is not the same as being valued. You're learning to tell the difference between real love and transactional attachment. And you're beginning to understand that being kind does not mean being passive. Real kindness has boundaries. Real kindness has discernment. Real kindness starts with how you treat yourself. When you begin treating your time as sacred, others will too. When you start speaking with clarity, not apology, people will start listening differently. When your no longer comes with an essay, and your yes comes from alignment instead of guilt, the entire tone of your life shifts. You don't have to be cold to be powerful. You don't have to be harsh to be respected. But you do have to stop making excuses for people who drain you. You do have to stop letting fear of rejection keep you chained to dysfunction. And you do have to stop apologizing for needing more than crumbs. Because deep down you know this, you were not born to be background noise in someone else's story. You were born to live yours, fully, loudly, and without shame. That kind of life doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you finally say, enough. Enough shrinking. Enough pleasing. Enough pretending. And in that moment, you don't just reclaim your voice, you reclaim your identity. The world begins to see you as you see yourself. And when you see yourself as worthy, everything changes. Not because the world gives you more, but because you stop settling for less. That shift, that awakening, is the beginning of everything you've been waiting for. Respect is not something you ask for. It's something you command through the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you treat yourself when no one's watching. If you wait for others to validate you before you step into your strength, you'll always be shrinking to meet their expectations. You'll always be giving more than you receive, hoping one day they'll notice your worth. But here's the truth. If they couldn't see it before, they won't see it after you've drained yourself dry. People don't respect what you constantly discount. And every time you ignore your own needs to keep someone else comfortable, you teach them that your value is negotiable. It's not. You were never meant to play small roles in your own life. You weren't born to keep handing out pieces of yourself to people who only take. The moment you decide to take yourself seriously, your time, your feelings, your energy, that's the moment people start adjusting. Not everyone will stay, and that's okay. The people who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always resent your growth. Let them. You are not here to convince people to honor you. You're here to honor yourself so deeply that the world has no choice but to rise to meet you, or move out of your way. Being kind does not mean being weak. In fact, real kindness takes far more strength than people realize. It means saying no when it's hard. It means standing alone when no one agrees. It means walking away from comfort to protect your peace. That's not weakness, that's power. But if your kindness is always accompanied by silence, always tied to self-abandonment, then it stops being kindness. It becomes compliance. And people don't respect compliance. They exploit it. They sense it. They push the limits, not because they're cruel, but because you haven't set any. The boundaries you fear setting are the very things that build trust, first with yourself, then with the world around you. When you respect your time, you become intentional. When you respect your emotions, you become grounded. When you respect your standards, you become magnetic. People may not say it out loud, but they feel it. They sense when someone knows their worth. They sense when someone won't tolerate disrespect. And those who value depth, those who want real connection, will be drawn to that. The rest will fall away. You don't need everyone to understand your transformation. You don't need the approval of those who only valued your silence. You need to look in the mirror and know you chose yourself, that you stopped settling, that you finally saw your own reflection and said, this version of me deserves more. Because the moment you choose to no longer be overlooked, mistreated, or minimized, is the moment life begins to reflect that choice back to you. Respect doesn't begin with others. It begins with the moment you stop betraying yourself. And when that moment comes, it doesn't just shift how people treat you. It shifts who you allow in your world entirely.